Hi, my name is Jesseline, and this is a video that a lot of people have been wanting. So this is trig ratios. So the Sohcahtoa, so sine, cosine, and tangent. This is actually one of my favorite things to teach, so I'm excited. So first of all, we're going to talk about sine, cosine, and tangent. And how you remember this is a word called Sohcahtoa. Okay, and if you notice, so S stands for sine, and then what that stands for, OH, is opposite over hypotenuse. And again, we're talking about right triangles here, so that's opposite over hypotenuse. And then C stands for cosine, and then the A stands for adjacent over hypotenuse. And then T stands for tangent. And tangent is opposite over adjacent. And I'll kind of explain this better when we have a right triangle here. So this depends on what is your vantage point, what's your viewpoint. I'm going to say right now in triangle ABC, I'm going to say angle A is my vantage point. Okay, so if angle A is my vantage point, the hypotenuse never changes. The hypotenuse is always directly across from the right angle, so this is always the hypotenuse. But depending on your vantage point, the adjacent and opposite can change. So adjacent means by the side. So the adjacent side to A would be over here, and then the opposite side of A would be over here. Okay, so when we're talking about sine, cosine, and tangent, and talking about opposite over hypotenuse, it'd be the measure of this side over the measure of the hypotenuse, because that's opposite of A, if we're trying to find the sine of A. Okay, so let's do this. Let's work it out. I'm going to leave, actually, I'm going to erase this, but I'll leave Sohcahtoa up there so we know. So have our triangle. Here's our right angle. So knowing that this is our right angle, we know our hypotenuse directly across from it is right there. So 61, 60, and then 11. And let's just do some of that. So I want to know, gotta name it, J, K, L. I want to know the sine of J. What would that be? Well, sine is right here. That's opposite over hypotenuse. So J is right here. So this is our vantage point. J. So opposite over hypotenuse. This is always the hypotenuse. So opposite would be 60 over hypotenuse is 61. And then what you do, okay, so to find the sine of J, the sine of J is just the ratio of opposite over hypotenuse. So the ratio opposite, 60 over 61. So we just do that, 60 divided by 61, and we get the ratio, and I'm going to round it, so it'd be 0.98. So you just simply write 60 divided by 61 in your calculator to see what the sine of J is, and it's 0.98. So all of these trig ratios are just ratios of the sides. And I'll show you something in just a minute. So like if I want to find the degree of J, I can use that by finding by knowing the sine. So what I want to do is when I'm trying to find a degree in my calculator, I always write the inverse of the trig ratio. So sine of 60 divided by 61. And so in my calculator, I'll show you, I write this 60 divided by 61. I wrote the inverse of sine. And if you can't find it, it's second, and then you push sine, and that's how you do the inverse. So second sine, and then 60 divided by 61, and you see that I get 79.61. So angle J is around 79.6 degrees, okay? So people are like, well, really, what is sine? I don't understand it. Well, sine, if this is J, then the sine of this will give me this, the same ratio of 60 divided by 61, because that is the sine of J. So the sine of the angle J, which now we know is 79.6. So I write sine of 79.6. And if you notice, the sine of 79.6 is 0.98. It is the ratio. So all the sine is the ratio of those sides. And sine is the ratio of opposite over hypotenuse. So if you know the angle measurement, you can check your work. You can check to see if the sine of that angle measurement actually matches the ratio, 60 over 61. Pretty cool, huh? So let's do some more. Okay. That's just kind of the math behind the math, what I just taught you. Okay, in this case, it wants you to find the, I guess it doesn't matter. Oh, it wants you to find BC. Okay, so I want you to find BC. So here's X, because we're trying to find BC. They give us only one angle, so that has to be our viewpoint, our vantage point. So knowing that the right angle is right here, we know for sure that this is the hypotenuse, right over here, hypotenuse. So we're given the opposite, but we're looking for the adjacent. So we have opposite and adjacent. If you look up here, opposite and adjacent, O and A, is T, which is tangent. So we would need to know the tangent of 15 degrees is equal to the opposite. Opposite is 10.2 because it's opposite over adjacent, over the adjacent. And then we just solve for X like an equation. So the first thing you're going to do is, if we solve for X and it's on the bottom, you would multiply both sides by X. So if you multiply both sides by X, those cancel each other out. This just is X times tan of 15. We don't know what X is, so we can't write an actual number, equals 10.2. Now, still solving for X, this is multiplication in between, we're gonna divide tan of 15 divided by tan of 15. So in my calculator, X is equal to 10.2 divided by tan of 15. So I write 10.2 divided by tan of 15. Literally just like that in my calculator. 1.5 or 10.2 divided by tan of 15. And then I write. And then I hit enter and I find out that X is 38.07 if I were to round. 0.07. So that means the length of BC is 38.07. And you want to know what? We can check our work to see if you want to. Okay, so I'm going to say BC is 38.07 because we did our work. We can check it to see if the ratio lines up. 38.07. So the tangent ratio is still opposite over adjacent. So opposite over adjacent, and we're going to get that ratio. 10.24 divided by 38.07. I'm just checking my work. This equals 0.27. I rounded it. Now we've been rounding, so it might not evenly, but it has to be close. And so since this is tangent, then I just need to know the tangent of 15. So I write tangent of 15, and if you notice, I just write tangent of 15 in my calculator. If you notice, it's 2.6 0.26, and it will round up to 2. It will round to 0.27 as well. So we know that our work checks out. Okay. Now let's talk about finding a degree. Remember, anytime you're looking for a degree measurement, you put the inverse in your calculator. Okay? That's only if you're trying to find a degree. You put the inverse in. So here we go. We have a calculator. And we want to know the measure of angle R. We want to know the measure of angle R. So here's our right angle, so we know opposite of that is always the hypotenuse. Looking at the viewpoint from measure of angle R, we have the hypotenuse and we have the adjacent, because that's the one right by the viewpoint from the angle we're looking for. So hypotenuse and adjacent would be cosine. So we say the cosine of x degrees is equal to adjacent over hypotenuse, AH. So that's 5 over 5.7. And so remember, when we're looking for a degree, we'll write it in our calculator like this. So second cosine, so the inverse of cosine, second cosine, 5 divided by 5.7. And this, I'm going to round to 28.7 degrees. So angle R is 28.7 degrees. And that's how you do Sohcahtoa. If you have any questions, let me know. Thank you. Bye.